So to pick up where we left off, I'd like to start with the remaining tables and topics so we can go through and see what those learning objectives are that they selected.
Da digan di ani muntu chebala ani tanjing anzu ruga ni zi la de yorwa ani kunzu gi ju shi ta ani tenema shi jung gi mi yorwa on digan du cinema adre ins.
Okay, so we should start with table 2.
Table ni ba yimbe.
That good?
Yep. Yes, table 2. Can you just show the PowerPoint?
Ah, yes.
This there, the PowerPoint can use. Yeah.
This one?
The one with the image. Not that one. The one with the photograph of their group. Yes, that one.
Okay. Perfect.
Di nganzu rekam ni ba ni juje de zoonder da keda tani sejong ga moyir de zo da lobting namla ni keik ta ni njer lepe chashi su su ngunzen ta ba ta da tani da shepa do nyemba jiwa simje ni kap ni ke lepe chashi kon ta kon lan jiwa yume tani keji chichu zu namani kon ta kon yemba
제주 조 가르가는 거. 오케이.
근데 딱 깨지 제바드 전에니 키도 좀 거도 거요 메디. 근데 튜니 간주 투아 전에 고아지거라. 따도 아니 온바듯이 고아지거라. 어떠니가 아니다 레파가 사커 그 제발 아니 바지타리안으로들.
온바다 당당나 연준이라 그러. 오케이. Okay. Their topic is language, and their general idea will be what kind of brain part involved in language, and specifically speech, hearing, and comprehending the language content. And then also they try to present the key feature or the properties of the language, and then also advantages and disadvantages of the language. And they also want to see the difference between people with normal hearing and with a deaf subject. So try to see on the brain level what kind of damages or the what kind of system is broken in this process.
Very good. Can you say more about the advantages and disadvantages of language? Just a little more detail about that.
아니 결혼수 루카기 기기 케벤다 종구세에도 왔어. Dilia nizuti singing shifta song and digres.
Ni tapena ki shiba nazukwa ni ta perna katok tawi ni iwa mombus ni ta ki kumuni mutu chitap kara. Ta ki machine ni tinju mombus mutu chitap kyo mala.
The advantage of language will be in most case by using the language we can introduce for example how many different types of colors are there and all these things. Having the language we do have this sort of an advantage.
Tani ngansu samlu tangshik jigara. Samlu simla jig kon charba di para jig shigwa na ki kuguni par mudat jig checker mata ki me pa na ni par danro chukmares.
So without a language, it is impossible to present the idea that you have in your mind or to present whatever projection that you have in mind. It is impossible to present these sort of an idea to other people without having the language.
Okay, so all right, that's what I wanted to understand. So that is still an advantage of language. It's the way to communicate, but what you want to also show your students is how not having language can be a disadvantage.
제가 디레스 딜레드 삼발라 넘버 2 아니 기 케벤다 미 케벤다 종구 세디에 두 테디 아니 가조 조 아니 파 단데네 아니 केजी शेडी जम्मा दांडे की जुनी दिशा देगी और बस दिल लगे संभाला अने चिक लोग टू नंबर सोलिया अने की मैं भाई ना अने चोंगु खारी युंगु और से जोरवा खारी युंगु रे से दे दुजो के चिंबुचा देगी और इस
And here are some areas that you think students will need to know.
दा दुजो टेदी अने नंबर 2 की लोग टू चो की शेगुया की लेबे की सगु दो दुजो दिशा देगी और बस yes.
Describe this slide a little bit. There's a lot of very good information here, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what you expect your students to be able to do with this.
제가 다 넘버 2 딩 나노는 지난 니즈 망부시 도스와 이내야 딩 나노네 넘버 2기 아니 지금 룹줄이야 하는 거를 시작해 레와 연주셔와 디 카레 이메야 티스직 데시 도시 넘버 2가 큐로치스
네 먼저 안들 네 소소 바로 기체 시디가 리페 사크르세고가 아니 보로 그 사크르세고
저버트엔들와
저바트야디 아니 티가 레파 사크르다도 아니 젬바지가 아니 저바트던도 수수 고야지가 어디가 사크르냐래 문진지.
So here we briefly shown the pictures of the brain that is responsible for producing language, and then another part of the brain is that is responsible to comprehend the semantic content of the language.
So this is very important. And if I go back to your slides here, I want to see you explicitly say that there is a difference between language production and language comprehension and those areas that are involved. So right here, it says during speech, hearing, and writing, but it misses that really important difference between comprehension and production.
제가 딜러디 삼발다 넘버 2 지단 디나나 세부 동그리 지단 개 첨부지 가르쳐야 요래 수디 삼발라 아니 디 강기 비긴 체인 더치 드럼시 티사 디나나라 아니 케네 첨부 디니니 디 참민두스 페나차샤나 파 제버트리야기 레베 사구테다 아니 수 코와 렌사기 레베 사구니기 나나라 만다비 케바 조르바 온디 넘버 2 디나나 체샤스 딘디 삼발라 디나나라 페나차샤나 케자 코와다 냠바다 다 딘데 마도신 디상민도와 디안치 수 카세부 뜬제 지구에데 베게 침부차기 요레스 딘nen가 침부차기 요레스 제바 케이나노.
So this is very good. It's a very good outline, and you do have the information here. It's clear that you will communicate this, but I want it to be explicit in your list of things that you expect your students to know.
제가 딜러디 삼발라 넘버 2게 내드는데 베게 아니 셴바파리 나노 찬데 요바 인송자 아니 그런 속에 내드는데 개첨부디 시에 임바디 겐라 코란가 하고두스 디 개첨부레스 임바이나야 카세게 토네 아니 베게 루트 넘버 2다 디디 셴고 예세게 셈바징 아주 시중기 미유죠와 어디 나노라 다디 카세부 제고고에 디 베게 첨부차기 요레스.
It's very good. Describe to me what this activity would be.
다 넘버 2 다 디 최고디 아니 컨디드 오지레 디 넘버 2 아니 데시 균로치스
딩아주 최고 던지제 가르스는다 민니기다 계유백교 맞자와제 다 장바기 제지로와 민니기 계유백교 제네 다 리든지 줍주야이다 디 줍도 잠발라다 직잘라더 키안 딩아스탄 타주 마서와 간데 직 주야제도 잠발라 코니기 수차 수제 투도 라죠라 디단텐 그 게이싱이 되게 가주 야와다 라다그 돈에 가리체라 연구도 레오던데 직 도리야로제.
So this is briefly, they want to actually have some subjects and they communicate through only hand gesture or maybe sign language and not any verbal speech, and then they also compare that one with some other group who will use the language, and then try to see which one accomplished better in this process.
Okay, so we are here now. What you want your students to learn from this activity is how the brain still processes language even if it is not spoken. Is that correct?
제가 딜레드 삼발라스 that chiwa chigiyor das chiwa yudi sambala kyonan sogi chigdi ani lebe gi ani ki se jorwa ki te ani pige jeba ki thone meba yimba ina ya ani ya chig labe gi dadu chi koda do cha de gi yorwa dunzu thi de lebe gi yalen khare chigdu ta chigdi chagi yorbes. Yes, sort of, yes.
Yes, okay, very good. So this is a very good outline. The only thing I said I would add is to be very clear that the different structures of the brain allow you to process the production of language or the interpretation of language, and they're slightly different.
Chezanda di number so drumsi de mazone de pe abuchashas. Di indu sambala gen korange kanunge chibudi karin laba yimba ina ani jebatuya te da ani yan pigi jebe gi nandun deshi gya gi sembaka ni di mandawa cha de yorwa o dini ni de so khaser ta de cha de yesta.
So of all the ones we have looked at so far, all the topics, there have been very clear goals to learn about the neurons and the types of neurotransmitters, as well as maybe action potential. Do any of those apply here?
Chezan da ngazu dinal pena chashana di ruga shemba de zulpa dusta indu zambala manche jilia kharigi chang desha sidu zambala de lesui digi nalon la wangza thasu mandawa khande yungudwa wangza timba khande mandawa khande yungudwa digi nalon lenju gnuba khande chigdwa se duzu tede mangbuji dosine khoma duzu nalon chang desha deshi japsons di lagi zambala number su di nalon le ya dindegi chigi chang yumegi any case de yor mares.
Very good. There's another group that also was looking at language and communication. That's table 7. Should we see what they pulled together for us?
Group number 7.
Manzogi tandati joshi dire to karsa communication dang language resha. Dine nganso dire resha labshi migul tila tangbo ti dire resha dalen dwelling kang inams tiwadwa. Dine nipa dire resha karsure.
Can you just go down the next slide?
Yes.
Tangbo di dalen dwelling kang inams etiche. Dine nipa tila talent dwelling girik metawache ani ketang delation be talent dwelling chesulche dine sumbatila ketang ani karsugure talent dwelling barki khebarche ani shibatila ke gi chawe turimche ani dedang tv lebe chasha ki korche dine ngabatila nangchoi tang tv thone ani tatang len dwelling ki korla o duschine tishawe.
Yes, their topic is language and communication, and then he just went through reading this, what is the communication, type of the communication language and other type of communication, difference between language and communication, language processing and parts of brain involved in the language processing, Buddhist perspective on communication. Yeah.
Very good. So I see here that you plan to go over the different types of the different areas of the brain and the role that they play in how the brain processes language.
Kezanda number to dinner ani pigegi lebegi ani kei dan lebe chashe mandawache ani chashe duzu thedegi ani ang koranzo chele khare khare tigi yume on duzu thede number so dusine kwena shas.
So also the types of communication here, this would go very well with the other group's plans to talk about how another form of communication, another form of language would work. So this would work very well.
Cheza da dilu di samara yan chiki ani chike da gri karso dande gri na mambu shibi du sine number song shas dia ani thanji di ruka ngama ki danda chikan zu dande ki redan ri jorwa di da ani lendu ani yaku shiran du rest lega yaku che tu rest rinda mana mambu do dande chedang.
I think it's also very important that you've highlighted that you will expect a group discussion on neuroscience and Buddhism interaction on language understanding.
제자 아니 단도 디 칸이야 넘버 2 ngwe 아니 저기 기기 토래야 낭슈단 세리기 따당 토네 아니 루카기 트리듀치기 세저와 디야 넘버 2 두시네 아르순드 제디야 개침부 차디기어레스.
It's also very important that you've included different animals in your surroundings and observe how they communicate with each other.
아니 락바도야 넘버 2기 에니치기 인유기 단당간조 소샤리 망부지어와 dunzu topsi cheje ani khunzu gi ya pha dande chedan de mandawa country yime se jorwa or these sipsi che de pe misi ke chmu cha de yores pe cha de yores.
So when we are teaching about neuroscience, very often we spend a lot of time thinking about the human condition because we're very curious about how we do things.
제가 먼저 그 망부실이야 지금 완전 세리단 제비 계제시 인도 삼발라 만체디 에네치기 먼저 로아 미단 제비 돈에 계제시 연구요. 그래서 디 가르치는 레스 삼발라 말한서 인조 레슨 라우데 먼저 로아 미드 조게 지기 내가 제단 컨트리 세요와 디간레 연구요 삼발라 안 디기 돈에 차 연구요. 그래서
But here you can also include other things and other examples of communication that happen a little differently from how humans do it.
제가 딜레리 삼바라 양 결혼조 그 넘버 디 지금 로아 미자마이 바는 셴바 두주 테디기 아니 단데 제단 카레카레 안 로아 미기 지줄레 셴바 인조조로 단 타데 인조조로와 온 두주 칸에 양 지기 도나테 다다 칸다 두주 케쳔부 차용고요레스.
So your first slide has a picture of these birds communicating. And it's very good because there's a lot of neuroscience research on bird song and how birds sing and what we can learn about communication and language through bird song.
제가 다 넘버 저기 아니 슬라이드 담보 코라네 단데 디칸레 퍼리기나로라 지우니 파주 단데 체베기 넘버데 트웬샤스 디페미시베 야고레스 가르치네 레시디 삼발라 단다바다 원자 세리기 냠시 망부 시위직 지우 dunzu기 지기 셰당 세기여 바이나레다 칸다 아니 파주 단데 체당 조르와 오 디칸레 아니 냠시 망부지 두시니 체디기요 레스.
So here would also be an appropriate lesson to include how models are useful in neuroscience. So you can go to the literature and start to learn what scientists are learning about how other organisms accomplish the complicated tasks that we do.
제가 딜르리 잠발라다 디나나 nengaji 가르차 용교를 수도 잠발랑한조 페이스북이요 jorwa 어 디나바서 아니 지기 세리기 피게 아니 단당한조 literature 다다 시중 가르쳐 거래 당한조 지긴 줄로기 시중보다 샘바죠와 디나나 때베인바이나 양지기 뉴지 체사도 체데 양 피게 페이스북 토네 아니 주양 고알레 줘라 하고에 고도레 줘와 언더주 된나 무슨 제도 그랬어.
Okay, so very good. I wanted to show you very quickly again from my slides here. If I go back and I can share my slides to show you. I think this is it. So when I asked you to think about concepts, facts, and skills, the lesson plans that you all are making are very heavy on facts and concepts.
아니 게라 코란기 딩엘이야 단당한조 똥차 고도 다가는 신지게 된뒤 아니 제스네 넘버 송칸 두스케지시 인도 잠발라 아니 넘버 저기 롭생기 창고에 나눠라 망체슈디 가르차디고도 시도 잠발라 단당한조 고도 단데와다 똥차 단데와다 아니 된뒤 딩이니 나눠라 다 칸다 된뒤 테스직 니주 망불레 된주 주고 차불레 된주 도든데 차디고도스.
Let me go back and share this. So earlier I mentioned, some of the other groups have the action potential or neurons and types of neurons that are relevant to that lesson.
아니 넘버 저 딩엘이야 아니 루카 셴바도 저 텔이야 아니 지기 원자 타주 만다와다 아니 양 원자 팀바 만다와 다가 나신지기는 코란족이 롭젠난 제유기 텐제기 니주슈임바스.
But not every lesson has to have all of those things. This one would be a very good way to introduce a skill, which would be to search the academic or scientific literature and see what's out there that you can apply.
Cheza dilidi zambala ane chik lobzen chasan la inji minji ki tanda di wanza timba da diri chasan sangwa dinde ngeba ke yo mares dilidi zambala tanda di dawu cha sha ba yimba na din nano la nganzu tse gi ri mangbu yu chinju tse sidi zambala ane pegen siri gi kyabgung gi nano la ane ji khung lung tse sa jorwa ane khande khande nang yu mi ta sa jorwa on duzu teni tse che ane di che na pe msibi ya cha gres.
So of course, language processing involves the action potential and does involve different types of neurons, but we don't need to use this lesson to teach those things. You will teach it in other areas. For this one, we can think about including more skills.
Chezan diladu zambala chida ani ki tsambala ki nanola ani cherim digi nanola wanza chimbada wanza rimanda watende tsanda tsand digi yores yimba ine dunzu tede thare nganzu lobsen di nanola chidi maje bache an lobsen ya shemba dinde nanola chidi chen digi yores ta thare digi nanola ani thanda nganzu chik tsegi khung thanda pige ani khung chesa ani cheri gi nanola kari kari yume jor wa literature nanola ondi chu ani chena ya yores.
Very good. Are there any questions about these two on language and communication?
Tanda di ani ki dande dan tebe ki ruka ni la number chongwene yan chik tiwa da gongchu da utende ke US.
No, very quiet today. Very quiet for questions.
There seems no question.
That's fine. Okay, so the last but not least is table 4, and they have to.
Oh? Yeah, it seems one from Cheyang.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. So I don't have like a specific question, but just one suggestion.
Yes.
So when they talk about language, I am thinking, if they can talk what the most popular language right now is speaking on the world, and also how many types of language in human society, and also what is the most popular language.
Yes.
And then make a connection between our language and those, how they become like very popular, right? So if they can teach them, to the student, maybe this will be inspire, monastic to learn more other language. But we know the language is so important to communicate. So, but many young, they don't have like the idea or like to learn how important to learn those things. So that's why. So if they can teach, through visually, then I think this make more sense to them.
I agree. So will you translate so everyone else in the group can?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll do it. Okay. Ta moral tiwa da misi ke me de ine samju tungtung yus. Ta samju de karre sidu sambala ani chigi ki dan tene ma lobzen chedu cheng du sambala morang ge samju la da chigi tan zambali na no la ki kera cheshu khare inas. Ani ki rimanda wa khande yunas. Ani ki kera cheshu ta ani ki thoma de khande khande chong ina. Tene ani ngaran ju paru la ki manju ki jorwa da phyoge so segu yorwa. O dinzu thede du syang chigi Jewata je ngotu da utu bayin bayina ani shwenje mangbu shiviji di ya da chiki geda cheshu de dira kyap cheshu de dir dan zamne na pyeje mangshu di tang yore sidi sambala yang khunzu le pige le chik simshu dawjis yingu dawjik ta chiki pige le trona phe chue jora ki indi jangdu ye o dinde ki thola ni kheba sugu mendo samgu dus.
Okay. So this is a very important point Choyang made. So using the learning objectives, what you want the students to learn, you are making connections that make it more applicable. So not only what you want them to learn, but why you want them to learn it.
Chezan da di ani kharicha yungu yore sidi sambala nganzu ani pa ani lobtu liya lobzen chedu chen de sambala ani lobtu gi phege shejung gi miyu di kan la ya ani yanjo kharikhi khamne kharikya yungu re sidi sambala phege ki duzu kharichine jangu yore ani di gi phege ngui gi phege ji koju gi lagdar jorwa khawa khawal phege dansa yore se jorwa on di samba de lu yungu yore.
Okay, so I haven't been able to study who exactly is there today, but is Kechok from Sarah, is Kechok there?
Kejo actually no, not he's not here. I think He's not participating in the sustainable program.
Okay,
Somehow.
no problem. I was asking because Kechok has told me a joke about why it's important to learn a second language. And I was going to ask him to tell the joke. It's a very terrible joke, but he does a really good job.
Thank you. The you may country sugar, Jumzen Kari is the Zambala, and Ingema Koranlea, and the chopjik, Satam Sodozik, and a key Niba the Karichin Jangu, Yores and Jaggy, and it's a chop the Ngamba Dovus in a lance, so this in any Koran, the chop the Anjusic is on Lagu some songs.
So I won't even try to tell the joke, but if you see Kechok someday, ask him to tell you that joke.
And Morangi the Satam Dovudi, Pa Jurguna, Jurtusa Mares, Jure Kandati, and a Jelia, and a Choranzo, Kejo, and the Serachik and sitting in the Chaliorwa, and a call to any condition and degrees.
Okay, very good. But these are just examples of things you can do to get your students engaged and why they might find it important or not.
Chezan, the Zuda Kari Residu Zambala, Namazoki, Chiki, Lubtu, Pigele, and Zushu Yuangi, Danganzuki, Lobzenki Changu Jorwa, that did the Chadugores, and numbers of the Maimbe, Mambusi, and Secho Yores.
Okay, any more questions or comments?
Yeah, yes, one more.
Yes.
Zudi Karse, Keg Shijong Jura, Keg Shijogi, Dandri Rutotedo, Lebag, Lesak to Dandichi to Jura, the Dandri to Musi Kebagar, once a temper to Zoni Keg that Dandri in the Chagur Chamar.
And once a temper to Ki, Dandri Chagur Chagio Marisigur.
Tido Tagan, Judo was not the Zogars, a Pensi Dandi Chewora, what did you Dandin draw you?
Kill Sigmar. Okay. So when we speak about the language or the communication, so can we refer the transmission or the communication from between neuron to neuron as some sort of language?
That is an interesting idea. And it could work. So say more about how you would try to pull that off.
That deal of this umbrella chick chena the numbers of Jushi the intro which that didn't some the intro would race. Chick chena any chovis or droves race. In that did so the Suzuki Pigela that Kandejila he lagi may say at Ojora, Kandejin Jugi may say Jorwa, chicks in a deal rally race.
I want to hear from you what your plans are. How would you do that?
How will we do defining the language?
How would you use language? If I understand the question, it's that the process of language is similar to the process of neuronal transmission. Is that what I understood?
Yeah, actually, the question is that so when you speak about the language, so the transmission between neuron to neuron, the communication between neuron to neuron, can we consider that as some sort of language?
Yes. But yes, you could imagine that, but I want to understand how you would try to teach it. What are your basic assumptions about that? So are you thinking of the neurotransmitters as the words, or I'm trying to figure out what that image looks like for you.
That the ladies and Balachurangirwa, once a timbani, once a gay, any nigipazu, any dandiche jorwa, dingazuki remare se jorwa, di any toad Kurangi, any samutanda, Dutch penachashana, any Kurangi, any once a nigiparula, kejashi, dandichigri lava imbaina, and once a timba julu jorwa, then timba di any case or dozi. Ani Chingazu package city some Guyo and the dear Doji can turn some tangu. So Churangi and the Gomba Shedan di Karim, so di Hagu, yes.
Matanda de Garcena was a temper to Matongora. And it Cheloni, Tanquino, Nichela, Lizard Sionche, and it done desert they wanted that Pananimi water, one day Nimi water, Takato Marbres, and he had level that on
that Kindu,
Daddy Kimura, Daddy Kinded Loda, the Zedaji Tongres, and the want a temperature Tongres. What did they want a temper to Koroni, Takarse, Kera Chow would Kandai Naloi.
No, on the Timba Kona, Timba than the Dirwa. Okay. So he was saying that when we actually detect some sort of in the light, and then that light converts into some sort of transfer that information into the brain, and then through this process from the electrical signal to carrying in the form of electric signal, and then it releases some sort of chemical signal release chemical signal, and that passes down to the postsynaptic neuron receptor. In this process, the neurotransmitter, is it some sort of in this process, can we say the neurotransmitter are some sort of the language?
Yes,
Yes.
you could. So for example, there are different types of neurons that have different neurotransmitters, for instance, dopamine or GABA.
Digiores, the penachashana say, Ani Dwalaya, once a timber the any rimambujores, penachashana on the dopamine, the gabagi wants the timber of the chashava in my nas.
And I suppose the equivalent would be one is one type of language. So dopamine would be English and GABA might be Tibetan. So there are different languages you could use to say different types of communication within and between neurons.
Cheda, the Dilla Dizambala, penachashana, Kurangi, Kande, Gumbashin in Digiores, Dizambala. Ani once a timber rimanda mambuyorwa, penachashana, Anichigi, once a timber injiki imbache. Gaba with English in Bayina, and the Drova mini Purgate sort of Zida Kanda, once a Timbani Porulaki, Mandawa Pujitan, the sort of Zil, Gombashin and Rigores.
So I think what I can answer here is that there are some standard examples that we use, some standard metaphors that we use to communicate about different things in neuroscience.
That numbers of lane carriage in City Zambala, and in Namju, one that said in Nanola, Sirwa, Ani Chigi, Pa Dande, Chidu Zambala, and in Anzu, Pigela, Tanda, Ani Chigi, Tsedingi, any pension dosing, Anzu, Dindiking, and your rest, Anzu, pension or a metaphor and the Pisu Dosland and Digu touch and the Pisuranda Mare.
So for example, when we talk about receptors and ligands, we're always talking about locks and keys.
And the penachana Kandichag Yore, City Zambala, and Anzuchigi, any Dalempada, any Pigel, Dajingijor, what the Wilson of Zimbaina, Dini is so carries current Ravuyore, City Zambala, any Gonja, the Dimini Ravuyore, as one of the Kajishigures.
So we're commonly using that example.
Commonly what?
Pardon?
Commonly what? I missed the...
We use the lock and key example whenever we're talking about receptors all the time. It's very standard. And then in DNA replication and protein synthesis in biology, we use the example of language a lot to explain how you move from the DNA all the way to having a protein.
Cheza, that the penachation, Gonja, the Migi, Tsudi, any chigi, Anzu, pension with the and Sedingi pension which Mount Pejumamudan de Chategures. Lakbadu, Anzu, Rize, King in Siri Nanon, Rize ne ma, any Tinze Suejor was. Twinze Suegi, Jurim Digi Nanola, and a chick Zegi, Mambu Shiviji, any Dejor Chegu was. Tindegi Jurim Dinanola, and a yard Dini Parulia chick Dande Chejor, Kig in the Vaches on the depends of Mambushigi or rest under the.
So what I want to say is your own ideas, for example, the language and the neurotransmission, if that works for you, then you can use it in your classes as long as you check it and make sure that there are no big problems with making that an analogy.
Cheza, Dilla Zambala, Daikuna Rangi, Samlu Nanola, Sirva, Ani Penachashana, Jiki Sidi, the Tanda Wanza Tazugi, Tusundoramgi, Pensuj Duas, Di Kurangi Ma, Ani Chiti Chibi Kablaya, Ani Di Kurangi Tata Digu Samnas, and dima and pisu dikan and desi jebje and kanyon ro ketigi minduna and kuran tagara dikan pejutanje and do cinema and lubrication and rigures.
So what a successful science teacher will do is to take the concepts that we're familiar with and then make connections that will work for your particular student group.
Cheza ane chigi gigi ane pige lobzen liya ane changwe lamnung yaku sutinge manche di khari chigi yore siri zambala ane susu gi thambo lobzen yorwa da di ane chig namju gyunde ha khoya da di pesu da pha jane ane pe da dini nyindre pha nyam thone en chidi che yorwa da khurang di nanalo lobju gi khari khari shingi yena mena so susu gi lobju le tab dyen rendwa o di da an jane do sini chigi yores.
So for example, when I started teaching in ETSI, in Emirate Tibet Science Initiative, the first year, I got a lot of questions about if snakes can see sound.
Pena chashana ani gena khorangi ani ETSI ke lobsen lama do lorin thambu tribi kableya ani thiwa mambushi kharile sung lawa ina dugi ani danthung thu mare se jorwa odi nan devi ke thiwa mambushi le songs.
So I learned very quickly that was a part of some debate, conversation, and that I needed to know what would be useful for the students for me to explain if snakes can see sound.
Cheza ani gela khorangi tine kare ha kozon sidi sambala da di ani number chigi tsebe gi thone yedin jogi tinde gi nizu jimba ha kozons de le sambala ani da chigi drugi dra thung thu mare sidi de lobjul ma ani chi ngodre di pheje khande sini ta khande pheje chimbu chagi yeme se jorwa on di khala do sini samlo ko wins.
That's not an example that I would have to use at Emory because most of my students would not be curious about that.
Dindegi pension di any china gela khorangi ani khalla wore ani namju pige labra nalola di pheje dangi yo mares kharchin lana lubru mangbu shiviji in di khan ya ani kharse gore trona da chi ingdo dinde shira yo mares.
But knowing your audience and knowing what they expect and what they already know can help you to figure out what kinds of examples you can use and what comparisons you can make.
Cheza dile zambala ani khorangi pige lubru number zogi ani khare shingi yo wada shendio khari yo wada an digi nedan do zole tene ani khorangi pension khari dangu do pension khari kiyungu do ani ya shemba da khari durgu do se jorwa and that is so ani dili pige lubru gi nebol cha digi yores.
So you should feel confident to use applications of things that make sense to you in the context that you will be teaching in.
Cheza dile zambala ani khorangi ani chigi nedyon khariji nangdyon khariji tigi yo baina nangdyon digi nanola ani chigi pige la nde chakbu yunjo gi ani pige pension ani pige lagdar yunjo kuju yunjo dinde khari khiyuna khorangi digi yo res.
Okay, so thank you for that example.
Ani di ani khorangi pension duzutta dene sungje na sombadi in tochenas.
Okay, so let us move on to stroke from table 5.
Table 7, then what should we, it's there. Yeah, table 7.
I thought, did we not go over them?
No,
We did.
Did table 7 dosa mare? They have a question. They have a question from table 7.
Okay. Yes.
Danganzogi lobsen chagu dioragi. So the ndagarsa concept fact skills minane so skill din nang chur la sa.
Skill na lu na ya go yore lerking.
Odi nda khunung khanda yemi chena ya go le de manzo rangi khunung chene ma bula ma ngas ngote chene ma thidan la ore so bula ma chedan labla ti kandin.
Bugul ma
Nokchula.
So, in their learning goal, you said that it would be nice, or if they can actually include the skill part, finding the resources in the scientific literature. So, when you say that, does it also? When you say that, do you mean specifically for them to find the resource, or to introduce how to find that resource to the students? So that's the question.
Yes, both.
Both.
Yes, but more importantly, to teach the students that they can find this additional information for application and that they can go to the scientific literature to find this as well.
제자년가 체슈데 가르치기 위해서도 삼발라 로투 넘버 솔이야 아니 딘데기 콩쇠야디 아니 마 ngotu 투바체 아니 코란조 ngöne 아니 피겔라다 콩쇠자 카와카 이미지어와 디 피게 꾸주 롱하게 라다르치야 윤조 어디니스
So in designing this activity, by asking the students to find different animals and how they communicate with each other, this will give them a practical example that they have seen. And then they can take it to the literature and make a scientific connection with the types of research that scientists are doing.
Diladu Zambala number Sugi Tanda Dinano Chegu Digi, any Pigel Chinkuyu Nanola, Sojan Ramada, the Taya the Chadegua, the Zambala Kunzu Tega Pigi Musun Tone, any Anji Keda Rinda Mambu Shiviji Dusine, any Toshi Shito Shitan Teda, Tene, any Dunzu Tedi, any Anjin Serigi Tanda Pado Nyamshi, Kawakala Che, any Pigin Serigi Kun Nanola Tseje, Dini Porugan Tevata Jorwa, on the Ketchimbuchagi, resti.
So me change and show an example of that. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yes. So this is a study done by Sam Sober, who is a biologist at Emory, and he studies bird song.
Tanda di any same sober lange di any tanda Emory na no la kingun seri ba jin sare the khogi ani chiugi shetan da chingmangbu jorwa o duzu khande ime golia ani nyamshi chebares jambares.
So when they can look up this information, again, it's in English, so it will take some translating. But one of the things that Sam says, if you can translate this here.
Ani chidanda duzu te number zo sama injinal reshas da yimba ine ya da ding na no la ani thanda jik chembaji khona sems khona ge lamjosh ma te inas the brain takes information and figures out how to interact with the world through electrical even called action potential or spike in the activity of the neuron. Sober says a big goal in neuroscience is to decode the brain by better understanding this process. We have taken another step toward that goal. The brain takes in information and figure out how to interact with the world through the electric event called the action potential. The inju khar lagyo re sidi sambala nganzo lebe gi serwa ane chi gi nizu duzu thedi ane khande ime se de di ane nganzo loda gi gyune serwa da chi zo de lenju nu ba se jorwa da no digi thone dusine ane ya ane nte jog thone ya lengi yo re se so no chik serwa. A big goal in neuroscience is to decode the brain by better understand this process. That deal of this ambala ane so ane miuchi kharcha yungu yore wanda seri miuchi kharcha yungu yore sedu sambala ane chig lebe ge nanola ane chig sangda duzu thedi ane pha decode che code sangda code su sangda kha yorwa sangda yudu sambala di pha ane kha chene serwa brain by understanding this process dig chirin di ha ko thone and dig nedan khande ha ko ache and dig tholia nganzu gi we have taken another step toward their goal dig mi der ya nganzu ya khomba masun khomba yanju phama jik do sine pe yore se so do di labdwa.
So this is an important thing, and you can see a very practical example just by the activity you assign, that is, look at how other animals are communicating. But you can see that scientists are doing the same thing because they have been doing this research and they can make connections between how the birds are controlling their song and how humans are using speech.
Cheza dile de sambal dan number jog pena chane chegu de pigela ngusula ta ane digi thone ane anching sendi gi nanole an dindi chegdi gi yode wa dun tuga de hakwa che lagba do sendi gi nanole ane tanda ane chig chiu du gi pha ane she ta ya da du da ane mi gi pha keda ge dande che dan dini ni parole ya ane mandawa khari yungu du shedo yuan jorwa o du te cha de gi res.
So something you can do with your class is to have them do that activity, but then ask them to go and search, and they can use Google or they can use other scholarly searches to see what research is happening in that area.
Cheza dilari sambala kamgaran number sogi luptu number solia da chik semba dawchi du ngode che savejela duzu tedin khande ke khung ko da Google nala yimba inare ya mena ani chigi pigelen kebe gi nyamshi gi semba de ngosa thasi dinde yorwa o dinde gi nalo na ani ching seri gi didan de nyamshi khare kharin du ani an chukon chue chue yorwa on de ya go yores.
So if you have multiple students in your class, you can give them assignments to find different types of articles and then come back and explain them to the group.
Cheza ani number so yan chig luptu gi pige nalo kharso goren dinde nalo luptu mangbu shiwi je ba yimba ina ani chig ruka la gwe chene ani kyonan zoge da chig nyamshi gi tsakwa dinde chig che shows ani tinalo khari yumi du zote yan su lo yundi sambala yan nyamshi gi tsasho nala ni zu dinde du sene pa nyamji che jorwa on dinde che chogu yores.
Yes. So they will also, you will see the keywords here. And this is sort of what we do with our learning objectives too. These are some of the things that you could learn by reading this paper.
Cheza dinalo la ni yan chigi sine ke thani ke che du zote dinalo pejo da she yores di nganzu gi yan chigi lobzen ti yundi sambala shi jong gi mi ji cha de gi yores da du zote de pige gi ani khunzu gi nyamshi gi article yorwa da dinalo pejo da she du zu cha de gi yorwa.
Okay, so I just used that as an example from that language and communication group, but any of the groups could also try to include that.
Cheza dilabi sambala tandang anzu ani pigela juzegi ta zegi khon di peju dan sejor wa di ki chokba di pension lang ni shiba nis ki gi tanda de dandegi khonzu gu jushi yunju jor wa di pension lang ni shiba nis ani ruga shemba same gi an dinde do ji chenen dian digi yores pension sam nis khonzu ga ji.
So what I do want you to be careful about is sometimes you have to select what your goals are. No, you always have to select what your goals are, and you don't have to teach everything all at once. So some lessons can be focused on the fundamentals and the details, and other lessons can be focused on skills and concepts.
Cheza dilari sambala da namba so karke chimcha yungu yore sudi sambala ani chigi changmala shijung mi yudi gugu yores shijung mi yu gugu yorte ina yanda cha chama chamaji thithuye di yomares midu sambala ani yang kyorangi ani chigi chu mis karche ta chigi shipta da ni chu mangbuji saman rothugu yomarwa ani yang chigi nizu pa mis pa kache ani chemba chigi nalo la kyoran yang chigi nyamshi gi ani tanda de khongse da chikse khongdo yorwa o dunzu tekala yan drone digi yores.
Is that okay?
Digi duas number 2. Yes.
Okay, good. So we go back now to group 5.
Yes. Rukangawa.
So our group name is Pedagogy England. So
Yes.
our
Did a slide now? Ah. Yes, if you just scroll down a little bit and it should be somewhere down there.
Here we are. Yes. So topic of stroke, and then the learning objectives are, here we go.
This one. So our group name is Pedagogy England. So our group topic is stroke. So we find out 7 difference on our learning goal. First one is what is the stroke or definitions of stroke. Second one is locations, the locations of stroke, where it's happened, parts of the brain. And third one is types of stroke. And fourth one is risk factor of stroke. And fifth one is how strokes occur. And sixth one is result. 7th one is neurotransmitter involved. So this one.
Okay, very good. Do you translate for the group?
Yeah, that din anol ane nganzu gi jushi di khare la bai bai na ane tip di cha de US dig nanol nganzu phigi drumshi so do di ane chamba duns cha de US tambo di khare re su di sambala ane tribune se khare cha de yor se te da tene ane tribune di ane lebi sagu khawa khawa la yungur se de chikche tene tribune ri mandawa khande khande yungur se chikche tene ane risk factors di sambala tribune yunga gi nyengkha yunjo gi ane shi kien se an mindu da kien khare khare yor se de chikche ane tribune khande su yungu yore digin jungje khande yungu yore digin nano na wanza timba khare khare sang yore se jorwa o dige di chan dige yos.
So I made some edits. Just one quick, I saw here you said a stroke can occur in any part of the brain, and I moved that close to location.
Cheza ane gela korang di nano la tis jig suju dan yos digin nano la stroke can occur in any part of the brain se the tribune de lebe chashe khawale ne yung sigri se de di yige ane lebe chashe khawale yungure se jorwa di khan ya dusne kesha yos.
Okay, so since a stroke can occur in any part of the brain, what do you expect your students to learn about location? Can you say what you expect your students to learn about location?
Ta lebe gi trip di lebe sagut khawai na yungu yo chodi sambalas ani khranzo gi lobtu gi ngwene ani lebe chaje khari da shenjue gi chigi rewa jorwa di khare khare chagi yores.
So our goal is any of the locations of stock.
So
Brent.
yeah, basically to be yes.
Re nga chu mi yu de da ane dibgyun jung se lebe chache chadang chig ane ngoto do chwins.
So they will so their group will bravely present the overall picture or the regions of the brain, and then they will introduce, stroke could happen, could occur in any part of the brain.
Okay, so I think here, this location as a learning goal isn't a strong learning goal. I think the learning goal should be that it can occur in any part of the brain.
Cheza di lebdi zambala ani lebe sagu khawa re se di ani shejungi miun ma shan digi or was pena cha chana di khawa ina yong chogu re se chibujik. Yeah.
But what you can expect your students to be able to do is to figure out what would happen depending on which location of the brain a stroke occurred in. So the learning objective there would be for them to be able to describe what happens if there's a stroke in a particular location.
Chezan de ledu zambala da nganzu miuji khari che chogu yore sidu zambala ani lebe gi ne manda wa chigla ani tanda nganzu trip di leba yimba ina ani digi ani khari chongu re se sundo wujik da di lobtu le shin juya gen deba yin se jorwa o din do wuju senen digi yorwas lebe ne deli ya tribune chona ani khari yungu yime di ani nganzu lobtu shi juyin se jorwa.
So part of what we're doing here when we identify these different topics and the different tables or groups have been working on the different topics is that we can use the other groups and we can use the lessons learned across all of the tables.
Chezan da chi khari re sidu zambala ani nganzu tanda chi gi ruka mandra we nano la ani su gi di ani shejung mi du zute che yorwa an di du zambala ani yang nganzu chi gi ruka su gi pige gi nano ne yang chi kande na yume di le ta che yang di chi che yorwas.
So a group that talked about communication and they had the Broca's and Wernicke's areas, you could talk about what would happen if there was a stroke in the language production area of the brain. So you can bring that lesson back by talking about what would happen with a stroke in that area.
Chezan pena cha shana tanda nganzu dande da jushinen shinjogi digi sokpa digi nano la ani nganzu ani jeba su ani karse gore ani tuya da ani jeba pa tuya da su kowa lenda nyigi tone keje she swans de ledu chambala kesi jeba tuya sa dele ya ani trip hoba yimba ina ani khande yungres and di yang anju ani jibu khari yores ne lobtu na mangodi che jorwa ya di che peninsula chogu yorwas.
The other thing I will say is, since a stroke can occur in any part of the brain, then any neurotransmitters could be involved.
Yanjo di danola ani tribune di lebek shashe kawal khazal yung chogu yobayin songza ani wanza timba da yuze tamje dinano sang digi yore se yasun rob chagi yores ta khanda.
So it's a little bit broad to include neurotransmitters here, since it can happen anywhere.
Cheza diladi sambala ani yanchi wanza timba de zute de khasa khala kharina yung chogu yudi sambala ani di antes ji kharse gore chig chapshimbu ndawjik chalu yorwas.
What you could include is some of the effects that occur after a stroke. And so you can show what are there types of neurotransmitters that become more active after a stroke or after, before and after a stroke, if there are.
Diladi sambala da di khari chi kharta ta yore sudi sambala nganzu tribunji po sabe jelas jela ani wanza timba khagi ma ani chigi ani ngarse da chelepe jorwa po sabe jela khagi ma yungudu ta jorwa o chigjena ya digala ta nendigi yores.
Okay. So the other question I will ask is, what do you mean by result? What do you expect your students to learn when you say result?
Cheza diladu sambala ani tumje laj duas tumje laj dinala ani lubju gi pege gi sheye gi and rewa yushan jodna dina kharitsu digi yor dina khar lagu yores.
So in result, like we mean to say what effects a stroke brings to on the person's physical. So like,
Yes.
So if person gets stroke, so it can be consequences with loss of consciousness, or the person could be die.
Yes. Very good. Not very good that they die, but very good that you have that connection.
Yeah, we should have those in here. The down the those to share the temperature that yeah, those the yabumarwas.
Okay, but that can be included under that structure function relationship. So when you have location here, a common theme in neuroscience is to talk about structure and function relationships.
Cheza diladi sambala di sambadi namazo kawana nolan tun digi yore sudi sambala ane chigi kweba da chele nyig paru gen dewa jorwa kweba da chele nyig dewa paru dina nolan ya dus tun digi yores.
So a learning objective could be for your students to understand the relationship between structure and function.
Cheza diladi sambala ane chorangi lupchu nabazo gi shijungi miyuji kari in chogre sudi sambala kweba da chele nyig paru gen dewa di in chogres.
And that's a universal theme in neuroscience. It's not specific to stroke. So stroke is a good way to teach about those connections, but it is not isolated. It's not only during stroke that we can learn about structure and function, but it's a nice way to communicate that idea.
Tanda kweba da ane chele nyigi drewadi ane wanzan sering nanola chichep drawjire samala yoyun chadigi yores. That digi ane samju de number so tanda di tribune da the trip da ane stroke jorwa that dida ane andrene ane koyan chig miska ne penjung thone ya ngodu che di ane shijung mi udos ne digi yores ta khanda di ngodu che ne digi yores.
So this is very good.
Shiraya udus.
So I'm going to fix this too. So I think this is a more thorough goal. You can have your students learn about the structure and functions of the areas of the brain and how those are connected, the structure and the function. And you can use stroke as an example for what happens when things are not working correctly.
Cheza diladi sambala da number so ani tip dan jene ani tip gi nizu de penzu ne lanche ani digi ani anchi kweba da ani kweba jilia ta kyun shoba imba inare da khanda chile da kweba nying parugin tewa jorwa o digi ani phige stroke pha ani jar che penjo gi thone andi ngodu shuba imba ina o di yagu yor sangu dosta khanda.
Okay, so these were all very, very good.
Ni shemba sama shira yagu dos.
So what I'm going to ask you to do now for a few minutes in your groups, again, looking at the learning objectives that you have identified, and then hearing from all these groups, I want you to look at what you have outlined, and see how long you think it would take to teach those concepts.
Cheza da number so tanda de ruga nalo la kama kashi stan ches ani kyoran gi ani shijung gi miyu ma dus nyingdu trisha wa te da an lawa do ani ruga shemba du gi ani de shijung miyu de number so la nyamju ngudri chi shinjo de zo la komba shenes ani kyoran zu tanda ani jushi kodo di ani ma ngudri chewalas lobru ji le ban chi ri chi gu gu na anda di tuzu ne ma zo na kazu jung go sa res tuzu kazu jing na la cha sa re se jorwa on di ngalo komba shiro chis.
Okay, so if we go back to my example here of movement and the learning objectives that I have outlined, I would say all of these things that I want to teach would take about 2 weeks.
Tapena chajin gelang korangi nguju dandibi gi lobzin chik dusine ani changui cheshin jo jorwas da digi ani gelang korangi tuju khajin gogu yume gi thone ma shuba imba ina gelang korangi pege semba de chasanji ma dus tubala peje dunrani ngogu ri samudus gelang korangu lobzin di tiwala.
When I say 2 weeks, what I mean is in a typical Emory classroom, I will meet with students twice a week. So I'll have 2 75-minute sessions, and I would expect this to take me 4 different sessions in order to get through all of this.
Cheza di labdi zambala yanchik dunda nying goguri sidi zambala gena korangi pigele emuri lichida ani lubdi chebi kable ya ani dunda chikla cha nyizma do lubdi lenzom cheyagi tuzi diyo marwa o di labdi zambala ani really ya da kama dunju tuyanga daw semba nyi daw cha dogi sarwa o da kanda dindegi nanola ani di chayagi tanda dunda nying goguri seye jorwa o di dindegi nanola keji shegi US.
So thinking about the types of classrooms that you have and the learners that you will have. So back at the monastery or the nunnery, when you are attempting to teach these concepts, how much time do you have and how much time do you expect it will take to cover the learning objectives that you outline?
Cheza dile de sambala da number zone duwala ani chigi gwende khagi ani lobse ma chiti chidu sambala ani chona la tuju khazu yume da ani susugi lobzen di changgu ani chazan jing ma chiti ki thubala ani tuju khazu ngosare se jorwa o di khale ani number so gomba shiro chis.
So I'm going to ask you for 10 minutes in your groups to talk about how long do you think you will need, how much time do you think you will need, and then you will report back to the group about why you think it will take that much time.
Cheza dile de sambala da number so tudu chege tuju kamachu thamba degi ins ani kamachu gi nalo la ani choranzo tuju chidi ma chazan chewala kama tuju khazu ngosare tuju digis goa di khazu gosare goa di ani kharichini gosare di tudu che tine ani gyumze ya ma ruga nalo nyamju che ins.
Do you understand my instructions and what I want you to do for 10 minutes?
Ani number so ani digi gengi lamduen di number so samen go chu sumes. Yes.
Any questions?
Seems no.
Okay, I'm going to pause the recording so it's not boring for 10 minutes while you're discussing at your tables. But after 10 minutes, I would like to hear from each group about why you think it would take the time and how much, where are you putting the emphasis in each of these cases?
Number 2, tanda di kama chugi nano lo zo de kharichini gogu yume da di nano ne zo di ane chigi ke cheju tsisa jorwa number 2 chidi sambara di khari khale ya ane shukche gyapsa jorwa di kawa kawa yume dige di number 2 gogu yus kama chugi nano.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So each group, I will go back here so that I have your notes to refer to. And which table would like to tell us first?
Ruka khagi ingel shaking ba number 2. Ruka 5 group 5 stroke
Perfect.
group.
So here are your learning objectives. Is this one semester? How long do you think this will take?
So we're planning to teach this lesson for 2 days. That means 1 hour a day. So
Okay.
total 2 hours. So in these 2 hours, like we are going to introduce the overall topics of the stroke.
Yes.
And then we want to learn from the students their observations of strokes. And then we are after that, like we are going to focus particularly on a structure and function, and not going to all areas of the brain, but a specific area. For example, like areas that is involved in speech.
Yes.
So if stroke occur, for example, like in the Wernicke area, so that may dysfunction the ability of speech.
Very good.
And then after that, we let student to ask questions about it. And then for like 15 minutes, we will take a test.
Yes. Very good. I'm glad you brought that up because your on-site assignment for tomorrow will be to write questions that your students should be able to answer if they have learned what you teach. So tomorrow, before I see you, you will have worked that out. You will work out what are some questions that you can ask your students, and then we will evaluate the content of those questions to see if it matches what you're planning to teach. So that's very good that you've included that.
Cheza tanda di gen ruka ngabe wanding ki sonya di nalola tsembachi kharcha di yore laba yimba ina ane tsembachi di da china nganzu tanda minema chidi chebe kabla ya ane chi gi ane trip dan chebe ki chi ni zu di ngotre da ane bige luptu number zo koran so mi ze nyowe nalola ane trip yun dinde ane chi ki she topshi chung yome tene zo di mix ndoyan di tanda nganzu lebe gi 아니 quepada challenge tewa tea penachashan jobatsu khwalyangi waniki lebisa gujora telekyun jaba imba ina yandi mige lebe queba dile kyun jaba imba ina ani mige khwalen la da khwalen dalan juwa khande khande dugu di thone mindu che yis antine ani thama delia ani kama chuchunga ge tribat lensik tribajik thanda ani luptu ge sheju chipsi che joro wo dik thul ta yis dik tola ta yin siri sambala gena korang di ani permissive ni churang ge somba de to chenas kharchine la na sani shoge ngazu de sane sado gi lontung gi na la chego chik di kharcha de gi yore siri sambala ani churang zo ge lubju gi pige la shin tagda ji khwale yume gi ani choda gi cheshib gi ani thiwa syogu gu yores di di sambala gena korang ge dus di rewalaya an number so triwache ani korangi ani cheki chashin dabuji di da ta digi dum ta gi yin se son dabuji las
Another thing I would suggest here, there are many good videos with people who have had strokes in motor areas.
Ani yanjo ani number solia ani gela korang ne ani lamdu ji khari shuni tosun la na tanda chiki guje mala dan guje dan debe yungu dan debe gi ani leben ne bolia ani tripjin pho ne ani tripjin pho shen jo tinde ani nyempo blanc shen jo tinde temuri tinde mangbu shibi ta yores.
So if you are looking for ways to teach this, there are some really nice videos that you can find that will demonstrate the speech area struggles, but also movement areas.
제자 딜레드 잠발라야 아니 교랑기 다치기 마 아니 레비기 쿠이드발라 아니 트ibjin 포 윤디 잠발라 아니 지강에 간이 되게 유명해도 되디 아니 교랑기 피게 냠포 군나로네 구주에 단제베기 아니 딘데다 아니 다가 나신지기 아니 제바드 트윈 단데바 쇼르와 오 드주 단제베 윤조네 냠포 나로 마무타 요레스.
Okay, so this is a really nice area to show structure and function relationships. And something that I just thought of that you could include in this lesson is the opposite side effect. So the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. And this is a really great example case to show that.
Ta di ledu zambala ani tanda di nganzu chikwa da chele ki pensu di di khana di che ani yanjo gela khorange tanda ani samnuji kharem khosong la ba yimba ina tanda nganzu chik doksho gi ani shukjin te se di doksho shukjin te se du zambala khare lagi yore ledu zambala lebe gi sho chik liya sho yel ani shuk ani kyun ji sho ba yimba ina ani chik subu gi yel ya dus shukjin te de teda ya lebe gi sho yema la kyun sho ba yimba ina ani subu gi chaji yel shukjin shukjin te de jorwa o di res da di ya number so gi pension daw shu ba yimba ina di khale ya chik min den daw zon den daw che ji shu ba yimba ina di ya thanda den re cha na ani tagda cha de yores.
So you might remember this from very early in the ETSI curriculum where we talked about one side of the brain controlling the other side of the body and where things cross.
Ani number so tudin su gi yoba yimba ina ani nganzu digi da lobzengi leshi joro thome ne kam ne nganzu khari ngodu che yore sidu sambala ani chigi lebegi shochil ani shochik da kyendu sambala ani subu gi chaje phasho dinda ani lebi sho yele choyindu sambala dini ni phachu ani shujin tesadi ani khasho kha dosho le cha de gi yo odin number so ni gi yo na tudin su gi na.
So that's also a very important neuroscience concept that occurs throughout everything that we do. And so if you can put that lesson or that objective under this lesson, it will be very successful.
Cheza diledu sambala dia ani nenga chembu chade gi yores di kharjini chagi yores di sambala ani nganzo wanze gi nalo la ani chig legam che mang che jorwa oda di tagdan rodan di chade gi yorwa ani di yel cha yel kyun shudi sambala yel di lega chedan di chade gi yorwa cho yuni odi chudi sambala ke chembu chagi yore ani di number so gi yan chig lobzen shejung gi mi yu nalo di yan chig chonden raw namba ina tagda yabu chagi yores.
This is very good. Do you have any questions?
Any misegi tiwake US? No.
Oh, good. Okay. Is there another group that would like to volunteer?
Ruga Shemba Tana to Yin Twinge in the US, group number Dumba. Yes, group number 7 and then group number 1.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Manjudi Dindra Chicks Gorsares Roa. And then Nimanga, Nimani Consensi, Nimanga, and choose Rere.
Okay.
Tian so lecture the choosing down any activity the SMM domichisum.
And lecture choosing activity choosum.
Activity the
assessment. Okay. So for them to cover the whole material or the learning goal, it takes for whole week and 5 days and 2 weekends. 2 weekend, I mean, it's a day off, but for the 5 days, maybe they will spend 2 days for lecturing this material, and then rest 3 days they will spend for the engagement of the activities and also the assessment part.
Okay, very good. So what level is your expectation when you're teaching this? Is this introduction or have they had some background already? Tell me about when do you think you would teach this lesson on communication? At what point in their learning?
Cheza dil zambala da dig cheti jorwa dig nanone ene chek neba gu rimba jorwa di khande imba spena cha na tangbo ne koran so phege gi dig nanolo kodo tez yungi jile cha dig yore yamena ane chegi cheti gi da chegi phege gi jabjung gi jorwa oda di number so khande gan komba shigi dig gan decision naro chis.
this she said this yoba che andi gala ngoto da lebe sagudu che andi gala toling trudu che
What it is, so they are planning to introduce this lecture or the material to someone who has a little bit background information on this communication and language, and yeah.
So they would have already covered the neurons and the parts of the brain, and so now they're integrating this information that they already have.
Cheza dile du sambala kunzuli ya ane chik wanza gi wanza trazu na wanza timbache an dine da mambu shibiji ngazu debji chigi yorwa on dozu tede sama koto yue sanjo ji gala ane lopri reverse.
Audience.
Yes, someone
Yes.
who has, yeah.
Okay, very good. But I am also suggesting that you could start with this and then use it to teach the other basic fundamentals if you wish. So you could start with this because people are familiar with what communication and language is, and then you can start to talk about how the brain understands language.
Da di yanchi ki ngozu sa de dine tsu cherwa da jabjung ni zu mengi de zu tele ya an ngozu sa dine ngozu chene ane dine yanchi ki basic ki shirim gi di yorwa ane tangbo chi ki ki thone kowa yongi che dine shirim gi lebe gi nebob nalo khande chigri se jorwa o dine ngozu ne tine digi yores.
So if you're starting with a group that has no background information, you can expect it to take a little longer because each section you will have to teach more details in order for them to understand.
Chezan de ledu sambala kesi churangi ani nisu duzu telgi ani junga chone mejo jabjungi nisu mejo dinde chigli ya yimba ina yang tusu de tes chig ju ring ngodo khawres kharchin lena churangi semba mambu dige nalo ge inen semba rele ya chig nisu shibra ngodo chigwa mambu shungur was.
So the difference between this communication that we're having and the curriculum for the nuns who are in year 4 right now is that I expect that everyone here is already familiar with the ETSI curriculum.
Cheza ani gela koranda ucha shaba yimba ina ani tandanganzu ani gulobzengi domshi jorwa teda ani thaga nashinjigi ani chola naba chole ya dus ani lobzengi tandanganzu domshi digi nalo gi nizu cha chawa jik ani ngegi ngarang ne tadu sambala naba ju chamegi kingu yebegi ani jabjung nizu chama yeba shija thone gela koranga dichigi yorwas.
So I assume that you have some of the basic information and now we are just putting it together and making connections.
Cheza de ledu sambala gela korangi ani chigi ngunsu dawdelia ani namba ju sambala shirim gi nisu di yewa shija che di khanlia ani dizu pha zon dewa khande tugudu ani di khanla ani gomba shiji du sini chigi yor was.
So we can move a little faster, I think.
Cheza de ledu sambala ani nganzu tes chig ko lobzema chiti di tes njoku khanla chechen digi yor was.
Was table 1 the other table that wanted to share?
Yes, table 1.
Ni ngozo rokwa tombi gata lotse de ani tremba ko ji di changge de la di jena nani datra chi yala ani chote na wasong chira ani chote re la ani chese ani disi chese chi chi che ani tatyo no gosha kane ja san ani lotri de chese ni dong ani shego de chese shega je ani jejel ani chese shega deyo loma de ani zo karesna lore jibi ga ani ta loma jesu chine titulani aloje ani disi changi chese yose jo
dunda chikje ani nima sum la du sambala ani
masun ta nima sun lo che yoya jira a chodere rela ani chese chi chi che
ala da dunda chik maro ani nima sum ma da mara
ta de nima sun ba ko jara
ala tambo nima sum tri ani anju tongba sha ale okay tiene nima sum okay ale dunda chik okay. So yes, so for them, they will teach this topic for 1 week, but they will teach alternative day, so leave a 1 day gap in the middle, so 3 days in a week, and 1 hour for each session. And they said that they will use maybe kama sumju di chu chega di lecture di ba tanda di assessment da dini ni ba.
제 셔골 치세 셔가도 아니 제줄 치세 셔가.
Yes, and they will use half 30 minutes for the lecture and then the rest 30 minutes for assessments and the activity.
Okay, very good. And what would that activity look like? So you have here the relationship of memory and sleep. How would you think about the activity? Do you send them home to sleep and see if they can remember something, or what's the exercise you're thinking of?
제가 제고를 디잠발라 남바조 카르레 스페나 차샤나 미드조 카지제 파조 니추 니가다 아니 니네 네 카르챙기도 문도 따야 된데 아니 카르차기요 레스 엑서사이즈 종다 도우데 카르차기요 레스 제고
셔고라 셔골 다 근조 발코 아니 레비가 드니 다코 루무나데 대소 레비가 사게도 인전에 제제죠. 어떠서 제제레스라.
아니 okay. So they will just let the students to recognize different part or different regions of the brain.
Yes. Okay.
아주 따지난 최고도 디더래. 인주 진짜 초에서 망제 인구 쪽으로. 니 년이 쇼라. 니 많이는 쇼라 담에 열어. 아니 칙 등으로 되니 가져 니 두도 메모리.
So the most of the class will be held during the daytime. I mean, in the afternoon session, so we can ask the students to skip the nap, and some student, they can take the nap, but some student, they will ask students to skip the nap, and then they will just try to do some sort of memory test, showing some words on the screen, and then see how much the sleep has impact on the memory, potential over.
Yes, very good. Excellent.
Yeah, we'll do this.
Okay, good. So thank you for all your presentations. And I know the other groups worked on these, but we don't have the time to go through them together.
Ani number two samegi dus tamse nas nere da din chu nyamju chewa dala to chenas and ruga shamba du te degi and dus in chale nan degi yore ine nyamju chegi ngaju tu jen dang ma sons.
Okay, so for tomorrow, I want you to stay in these same topics that I selected, and you are going to come up with some questions that you could ask your students that would measure if they are familiar with the content you have taught.
제가 딜레드 잠발라 넘버 2 산이 아니 당하라 주시 간주 아니 순든 셰셰 주시 당하라 디체 아니 디단 데네 넘버 2 조 나레 조 가르차 되기 요레 시디 잠발라 아니 루트 넘버 2기 단다 주시 디 녜기도 미도 따기 아니 쳄시기 쳄바 티와드네 가지지 키용구 요레스.
So you will upload those questions, and they can be open-ended questions, or they can be multiple choice questions, or they can be labeled a figure. So any kind of question that you think will assess if your students have learned your content.
제가 딜레드 잠발라 티와디 넘버 2 칸데 키위난 디기 요레스 아니 직 인다 메인 데만디 티와디 임바이나레 아니 아지 담자마위 티와디 임바이나레 야마나 피수 티고에기 티와딘데 임바이나레 tiwa khande ri yin bai na khanda zo lobchu gi phege shen do min do gi ani chepsi gi tsemba jor wa junen che ga wadi gu yo resta khanda.
The other thing I want you to do on site tomorrow is to think about what topic you would like to create a lesson plan for. So I assigned this one to each table, but if you want to stick with this one, that's fine. If you want to work on something else, you will tell me tomorrow when we meet if you want to prepare something else, because each table will have to give a demonstration of what their lesson plan looks like, and you're doing that on Saturday.
제가 딜레드 잠발라 야 넘버 2 담가치 요르다 담가치 디 카레레드 잠발라 아니 쿄란 졸라 단다 겐라 코란기 주시 디간라 찰레나 구레스네 나레 테샤르와스 이네 야 산이 야 넘버 2 쿄란 조 수수 긴 드뮤 예신 조기 주시직 di tanda di khala gena khorang nalitation ju jushi di khala mintu ne chale nan di digi yores deba yena di meba che susu gin du mi yu shen ju gi yan chik jushi ji dam che ne nga yan ko lob seng changwe che anda di yan jel di number so di sa kharsa on di Na pemba nyingala dit nama nyamju chegu yores.
Okay. Do you have questions for me?
Chiwa US number 2. No questions.
I know everybody's tired. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Tukeche.
Tulchena, thank you.
Okay. Have a good evening.